This video has Venom spoilers. Here are 3 seconds to leave. 3, 2, 1. Venom is the best superhero movie superheroes ever made! Nah, I'm joking. Or am I? Critics have bashed this film for being tonally inconsistent, feeling like it was from the 2000s, and not exploring the villain's motivations, and Tom Hardy doing some really silly stuff. Critics saying it is bad because it is tonally inconsistent and that it doesn't know what it wants to be really interests me. Some of the most influential films have had complete genre changes. Psycho is a crime drama that focuses on the emotional stress of the main character, and then she dies and it becomes a horror film. The Birds is a romance movie for the most part that eventually ends up like this. Then there is Life is Beautiful, that is basically 2 films. Then you have Dusk Till Dawn that starts like this and ends like this. Then there's that little film called Titanic that goes from romance to disaster. My point is, changing genres does not make a bad film. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Does Venom changing genres work? In my opinion, yes. It starts off as a typical horror film setup. It relies on horror codes and conventions so much it sometimes is laughable. It sets up Venom to be this being of pure evil that's going to be like Spider-Man 3, but this time done right. We see the symbiotes destroying people brutally, then Eddie gets the symbiote. We all knew this was going to happen. It was as expected as Peter getting bit by a spider in both the films where he got bit by a spider. But as the film progresses, we see that the symbiote isn't some Lovecraftian horror that brings out the evil you bury deep inside of you. He is
a bit of a loser, like you.
Unlike the earlier adaptations and the cartoons where Venom is the amalgamation of Eddie and the symbiote,
we call ourselves Venom.
Venom is his own person. So instead of a horror movie, we get this great comedic double act that is Eddie and Venom. And with that in mind, the earlier parts of this film that seemed laughable because of how much it relied on horror codes and conventions works as intentional comedy. We just didn't realize it yet. Tom Hardy being silly builds upon this. Yes, some of the film feels like it was from the 2000s, but he doesn't. Even before he gets the symbiote, he has a freshness and charisma that is comparable to Ryan Reynolds' Wade Wilson and Paul Rudd's Scott Lang. Like Wade, Eddie sticks out like a sore thumb, to the point it is almost immersion breaking. Wade is designed to be blatantly immersion breaking.
Oh, hello.
Venom uses the same techniques by creating a dull, stereotypical world that makes the hero stand out in a way that wouldn't be possible otherwise. It's also notable that if someone re-edited Deadpool into a linear narrative instead of how the original cut uses flashbacks, there would be the same tonal shift as there is in Venom. Like Venom, Deadpool's origin story is serious and uses a lot of horror tropes. Sure, he cracks jokes, but it's not until he puts on the suit for the first time the story shifts to a lighter tone.
Or you're gonna die! In 5 minutes!
So, would Venom have been better if it started with a scene that sets the tone, like a comedic scene with Venom and Eddie, and then time skip backwards to show the more serious origin story? Well, that's arguable. Unlike Deadpool and Ant-Man, which quickly set up the humorous attitude of the protagonist, Venom has 2 main characters that resemble the classic setup of comic and straight man. Straight man is a term for an actor who works with a comedian in a double act whose job is to act composed and realistic to the eccentric shenanigans of the comic.
Look at all the lovely little yellow spangles. Wait a minute. This might be gold ore. Gold ore what? Oh, gold or nothing.
In some ways, a straight man can be thought of as an audience surrogate, as they react in the most likely way we would if we met the character the comic is playing in real life. In traditional comedy, that is frustration and
I
annoyance.
think this might be gold ore. That's what you said. Gold ore what? Tell me, I dare you, tell me. Oh, with an E. What you kneel on? That's a knee. A knee. An E. E.
In this film, the comic isn't someone annoying who you could meet in your everyday life.
Outstanding. Now, let's bite all the heads off and pile them up in the corner.
Why would we do that?
He is alien gloop. So Eddie's reactions are considerably different, but they still follow the rules of being a straight man. He still gives a relatable, realistic insight to being with the comic. Although both Venom and Eddie do say things that are comedic, Eddie's humor comes from being sensible and acting in a logical, human way, while, like traditional comics, Venom is eccentric and behaves, well, alien. A straight man is often an authoritative figure because people like to see their bosses in distress. Unlike this traditional relationship, Eddie is an everyman. He starts off as a successful reporter with a fiancée and his own show, but as he loses his job and his relationship, he starts to become more relatable. By the time he decides to do the right thing, despite losing everything he had, everyone is rooting for him, and at the end of that scene, Venom and Eddie are one. Or are they? I re-evaluated my statement, and no, they are not one. Yes, they may have achieved symbiosis, but they are still fighting, unable to communicate effectively, and have very different objectives. One of the things that interested me the most about Venom criticism is how most of them say, "It's as bad as you've heard, but I had so much fun." On paper, I understand. I more than understand, I agree, but I was thinking, how can a movie with a comical lead work with such a stereotypical villain? How can that even be enjoyable? More importantly, how did I come out of the movie feeling like it had substance? The best superhero films have a strong philosophical difference between their hero and villain. Peter Parker uses his powers to save people because he learned the consequences of revenge with the death of his Uncle Ben. Norman Osborn has always had an inflated sense of self-importance and uses his powers to maintain what he considers is making him great, revenge being central to that plan. Spider-Man is the embodiment of great power with great responsibility, and Goblin is the embodiment of great power with no responsibility.
Those teeming masses exist for the sole purpose of lifting the few exceptional people onto their shoulders.
Batman is an authoritarian who uses fear to stop organized crime and bring hope to the good people of Gotham, so that eventually no child has to go through the trauma he did. The Joker is an agent of chaos who wants to destroy symbols of hope, to prove that everyone is like him, to prove everyone is like the man who killed Bruce's parents. He wants to prove there are no good people in Gotham. The Joker tells Batman they are destined to do this forever. They are unable to win, unable to give up. Bucky represents following orders without question, and Steve represents taking direct action to do the right thing, questioning every order he is ever given. By the end of the film, these philosophies are put to the test. In the Goblin's quest for power, he accidentally kills himself when attempting to kill Spider-Man, representing he was leading a self-destructive lifestyle. The resolution shows Joker right, but Batman responds by evolving, by taking the blame for everything the Joker and Two-Face did and becoming the villain. Batman wins the fight. He sacrifices being a symbol for hope so the brightest symbol can remain untainted, because
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. I can do those things because I'm not a hero. Not like that. I killed those people. That's what I can be. No, you can't. You're not. I'm whatever Gotham needs me to be.
Captain America allows himself to be beaten because he knows that under all the orders and mission objectives, Bucky is a good man. The film conflict ends with Bucky saving Steve from drowning. The resolution proves Steve right. But if Venom is an actually good film like I am claiming, what does Carlton Drake's philosophy do to challenge Eddie Brock's? Well, nothing. You can argue that Eddie's philosophy clashes with Drake's because he believes in helping the homeless rather than sacrificing them to science. You can argue that Eddie relies on friendship and human compassion where Drake relies on blackmail, lies, and having lots of money. But any argument you're going to make is going to be surface level because Dr. Carlton Drake is a sciencey businessman stock character with no modifications. Riot is your classic bad guy with the exact same powers as the hero without any of the philosophical elements to redeem that. So why did I feel I watched a good superhero film? I know my superhero films, and bad ones don't give me this feeling. It's missing this crucial element, the most crucial element of superhero films. Eddie has a great philosophy to be challenged. Eddie is selfless. He may appear arrogant in the first act because he doesn't take what will happen to his fiancée into account, but when you take all his other actions into consideration, most notably giving money to the homeless when he himself is being evicted from his home, we can infer he is trying to be his best self. Spider-Man's character arc represents becoming the best self despite great personal sacrifice. Eddie is already his best self at the start of the movie. He has the same emotional turmoil as Peter does in Spider-Man 2. He sacrifices everything by putting his relationship with Annie at risk. And even after losing everything by being a white knight, he ultimately decides to continue to help those in need. But unlike the villains of Spider-Man who challenge Peter's philosophy, Drake's philosophy is just being evil. There is no human part to him like Killmonger or Dr. Octopus. He does not challenge Eddie's philosophy to the point where he has to change.
All of you are wrong!
How can I claim it's a good film when the antagonist doesn't challenge Eddie in any notable way, doesn't make him question his beliefs, doesn't force him to change? Heck, Drake doesn't even fit into the same genre as the protagonist. Then I realized, Dr. Carlton Drake isn't the antagonist. Venom is. Underneath the layer of comedy and the associated codes and conventions, we find a serious, darker side to their relationship. These characters are all both the protagonist and the antagonist, or should I say, the antagonist lives within the protagonist. Dr. Jekyll's philosophy is all about the concept of good and evil inside of a person.
Man is not truly one, but truly two.
Jekyll believes that there is a good you and an evil you. Venom in Spider-Man 3 and the cartoons have been presented closest to the Jekyll and Hyde philosophy. Like I said at the beginning of the video, that is not the case for this adaptation. Venom does not bring out the worst in you. Venom is his own person. But who is he? He is completely self-absorbed. It seems like symbiotes' most defining traits are their hunger. And yes, he wants to eat people. He also wants to show off. He sees women as something he can win. He states it is very hard to find such a good match of a host as Eddie, and yet still starts to eat him from the inside. Although in practice, he may act more like family-friendlier adaptations of Mr. Hyde, from a conceptual level, Venom is more like the Wolfman. Larry gains the werewolf curse by fighting a werewolf. He seemingly kills the werewolf, but during the fight he becomes infected. It now lives within him. Sound familiar? Like Larry, Eddie is subjected to becoming linked with another entity completely separate from him, and like the Wolfman, Venom is driven primarily by killing people he treats as prey. Unlike Venom, there is no Carlton Drake equivalent. The film doesn't give us a secondary villain because it wants to draw attention to the antagonist living within the protagonist, and opts instead to show us the mob. One of the tropes common in Monster Within stories is that the protagonist and antagonist lives are linked. You cannot kill one without killing the other, and neither of these two characters want to end their own life, despite wanting to destroy the other. The mob is a force. The mob could be replaced with a natural disaster, anything that puts both the antagonist and the protagonist's lives in danger. It's just a mob is the best pick for the plot. Carlton Drake is just that, a force. He is rich and powerful while Eddie has nothing. Riot has
shit you have never seen.
While Venom is a loser. Drake is no more the antagonist than this person or this one or this one. I think it is important to take into consideration how by having Venom and Eddie as the antagonist and protagonist respectively, and by having them resemble comic and straight man layered on top of that, distances Venom from the character he was, and likely always will be, closest to. A little hero called The only time Eddie's straight man attitude changes is here. I think, conceptually, this is because Venom is acting through Eddie. Most notable when Eddie says,
This is dead. It's dead.
Despite this being one of the weirdest sequences, it draws a lot of parallels between Spider-Man's journey to get powers, but in the two origin films, Spider-Man's transformation has a legendary feel about it, which is weird considering he is the most relatable, most human out of all the mainstream heroes. When Peter is in public, the attention is always on him. When he is alone, he is depicted close to unconscious in a deadly serious way. In both films, we only briefly see him struggling with his powers in a way that he can easily overcome. Eddie's journey to superpowers is not romanticized. We see how difficult, sickening, and disorientating this is for him. When he is making a scene in public, he is largely ignored because that is how real people act when they see someone is making a scene. No one wants to get involved. I'm not saying Spider-Man doesn't have problems that he carries with him, but because Venom is the antagonist, the film focuses more on the circumstances that forces these two opposing characters together. Like how Raimi's Spider-Man focuses on how Uncle Ben's death and this accident forces Peter to use his power to help the powerless, and how by doing that, he gains an opposing philosophy to the goblins.
You're an amazing creature, Spider-Man.
The film's meaning is about doing the right thing, even when it costs you, but also not to be so selfless your life becomes misery. Eddie loses his job going after someone who is untouchable. He is offered his job back when he continues to pursue him, resulting in that character's death. This leads to Eddie being redeemed as Drake's evil deeds become public knowledge. But what philosophical point is the film Venom trying to make? Well, first, we should consider, what is Venom's impact on Eddie? He makes Eddie a little selfish. Eddie cares about strangers more than his loved ones. When his fiancée leaves him, he does the right thing and lets her move on after one apology. Venom pushes Eddie to be romantic, saying,
We'll get her back. Or maybe I said, you should kiss her. To be honest, I can't remember.
Venom is a negative force upon Eddie's life. So how does a negative influence cause a character to become more positive? Through the philosophy of George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Dialectics. Dialectics is the idea that by considering a concept, a separate and opposing concept will present itself which contradicts the first. These are the thesis and the antithesis. Instead of ruling out one or both of these ideas, Hegel describes a method of combining the two into a stronger and more true concept, a synthesis. In the context of Venom, Eddie is the thesis and Venom is the antithesis. They both are about the same thing, bettering themselves. Eddie chooses to better himself by bettering those around him, giving to the poor and spreading truth. Venom, on the other hand, chooses to better himself by destroying others, both literally
I have a parasite.
and metaphorically. This is a good contrast with Riot and Drake. Eddie and Venom have a common goal, which makes them perfect for bonding. Riot and Drake do not have a common goal, which makes them a fairly terrible bond within the world of the story, and provide no philosophical interest on a deeper level. Riot wants to destroy humanity, colonize Earth using subjugated humans as hosts, and presumably harvest our resources. Drake wants to make the Earth a better place, and ultimately save people, more like Eddie than anyone else. However, they still function as a bond, and this is because they share common beliefs about how to achieve their goals. Drake has no problem exploiting people around him and intends to exploit the symbiotes to fix humanity's problems. Riot intends to destroy humanity by exploiting Drake by using him as a host and his technology as a way of bringing symbiotes to Earth. These positions are not thesis and antithesis, they are contradictory and incompatible. I'm not sure if Hegel would approve of this turn of phrase, but they are both antithesis. They ultimately prove unsuccessful as a synthesis of ideas and in their plots to change the world. They are self-destructive as a pair. By bringing both Eddie and Venom together, they fuse into a much greater force than they could ever be apart. This is shown in a highly literal sense within the world of the film. But on a philosophical level, it is also true. Eddie, with Venom's help, develops healthier relationships with his ex-girlfriend, helps others around him more effectively, and redeems himself in the eyes of other journalists. Venom, with Eddie's help, manages to learn about how helping others can help himself. They both progress as characters.
I may be wrong, but I won't be wrong always. And I may be wrong, but I won't be wrong always. You're gonna long for me, baby, one of these old rainy days. That's all right, baby, baby, that's all right for you. That's all right, baby, baby, that's all right for you. Now just happen to you, baby, that's the way you do.